Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, it's an honor to have you on. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure, Rowan. Truly an honor to be on board. And, one of the things I always try to say on the podcast up front, I've been on 60 Minutes and 2020 and Larry King, and none of them amount to a hill of beans. You get 5 minutes, you can't control what's on, and then it's gone and nobody remembers it. And there was a time when the citizen journalism didn't exist. That's what this is, citizen journalism. I mean, there were maybe 2-3 newspapers in every city. There were 20 magazines that really impacted, and 3 major networks. And if you didn't get on them, you couldn't get. Now we've torn away that barrier, the guardians at the gate, with our podcast, citizen journalism, and we've got deeper levels of knowledge, and they stay there. They really are there to be tapped into in the years to come. Unlike some ephemeral radio interview that accomplishes nothing. So I really, really want to uplift you as a host for a podcast and your listeners who are seeking deeper knowledge. And it's really great to be on board with you. I love the stuff that you're doing about masculinity and focusing our energies and archetypal roles. That's really what I've been doing with the whole sheepdog model. And I tell everybody that the one thing that will come out of this pandemic is a vast influence in what a lot of people call preppers, sheepdogs, protectors. We understand now deep in our gut that the government is not always going to be able to protect you. The police can't always be there. You have to accept responsibility for your own protection and your loved ones. That may mean martial arts, it may mean training, it may mean, having food reserves or whatever it is, all those various things together. But an increase in embracing that archetypal role of the sheepdog, the protector. And that's what you're all about in so many ways. And the point of all that is that the world needs what you got to give now more than ever. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, just this pandemic situation has, I think many of us in small families are realizing we have to kind of rely on ourselves for food, maybe protection. If the world breaks down into anarchy, we all need to know the themes of your work as well.
Amen.
Yeah. So you were kind of on a roll before we hit record. So I don't want to lose that, but I do want to say up front, as I mentioned before we start recording, your book on killing. It's one of the few books that very directly changed the trajectory of my life. I was supposed to be a Marine Corps officer. I graduated OCS, read your book. There are a few factors that led to my decision, but I did have second thoughts due to some of the things I read in your book. And so it's an honor to have you on. I have so many questions for you, but yeah.
And the follow-on to On Killing is on combat, also on the Commandant's required reading list. And if I could have anybody who wants to prepare for deadly force, the book I'd recommend first and foremost is On Combat, issued in the DEA Academy, issued in the Marshals Academy, translated in 5 languages now. When I wrote On Killing, I thought the secret hidden heart of combat was about killing. What I found out was those who fully prepared themselves, killing is just not that big a deal. There's no wrong way to respond to killing. They're all okay. But where the heart of it, the secret of combat, is what happens in the incident: tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, slow motion time. How could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and just now let people, during combat, the shots would probably get muted? Why are we just now finding these things out? So, and then after combat, re-experiencing the event is not PTSD. It's normal. It becomes PTSD when you try to not think about it. You cannot not think about it. You've got to separate the memory from the emotions. When we talk about ways to do that, the swig of water is what we use nationwide. You're up here in fight or flight. We want to pull you down to rest and digest. And one thing I know, you work a lot about sexual focusing. The body breaks into the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. But it's also called feed and breed. Feed and breed.
Right.
Fight or flight, feed and breed. So after a dangerous or stressful event, you're in fight or flight. The backlash is feed and breed.
Right.
And so fire, EMS, police will tell you after they've been in a threatening, dangerous, horrendous event, the adrenaline's pumping through their body, they get home, they gorge themselves. And very often they have some very intense sex. Both parties are invested. It's very intense sex. And
Interesting.
it scares
Yeah.
them. They think, what am I doing here? This is weird. And the truth is, it's a normal body. You know, we're an adrenaline surge dynamic, whether it's rock climbing or firefighter in the heat of a fire or cop in a gunfight. And then we backlash in the opposite direction to feed and breed, fight or flight, feed and breed. And that's how we're wired. And
And is
that's
that
why
because, I mean, if you survive combat like that in nature, you probably just killed a major threat. You might as well procreate before the next threat. Is that the
exactly. It
idea?
is. It really is.
Hmm.
You know, a motivation to pass on the genes, you know, the procreation in the face of death. But it's a weird dynamic and it scares people. And we don't understand we're wired that way. Fight or flight, feed and breed, right?
Yeah.
Rest and digest. And so after this stressful event, both parties can be invested in some very intense sex. It scares people. So we want to be forewarned and forearmed about these things. It's normal. Enjoy it and move on. You know?
Yeah, it was interesting because I saw that in On Combat you made the parasympathetic backlash comparison to the post-orgasm state.
Yes,
When
yes,
I speak about
yes,
sex, sometimes I use the opposite. It's like you don't want to, for guys who are porn addicted, you don't want to be on that all the
oh,
time
yes,
because you're putting yourself into a
yes,
depressed state.
yes, exactly right. You know, you want to, yeah, oh, that's well said. You can delete the fight or flight dynamics and there's nothing in the well. You can also delete, you know, the feed and breed dynamics. And you go to the well and there's nothing there. Yeah,
Yeah. So before we get ahead of ourselves, because I mean, I've read your book, and I
yeah.
just want to make sure everyone like understands where we're coming from. Can you share briefly? I know in On Killing, one of your theses was that certain types of modern military training, I believe, is what causes PTSD or increases the likelihood. Can you
Well,
share a little bit
here's the
about
thing.
that?
Yeah. In World War II, we found out the vast majority of the troops would not pull the trigger. And it was a training flaw. They've been taught to shoot bullseyes. And no known cases any bullseyes ever attacking our troops on the battlefield. If you've been in the U.S. Armed Forces since the Korean War, never once shot a bullseye. A man-shaped silhouette pops you in field of view. You shoot the target, target drops. Stimulus response. Like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Modern training makes killing a condition response. And today, people will pull the trigger reflexively without conscious thought. They will save their lives. They will achieve the victory, but they need to be prepared to live with what they've been conditioned to do. And oh, by the way, video games do the exact same thing to our children. Book came
Right.
out in 1995, 3 years before Jonesboro, 4 years before Columbine school massacres. I predicted these mass murders were coming. They're going to keep coming. They're not going away. But just understand that the armed forces know how to make killing a conditioned response. And we got to be prepared to live with what we've been trained to do. And that's a
Yeah.
piece of the equation. Now,
So
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, just so I understand, from what I understood back when I read it, it's the remorselessness of the killing training, which is what causes or leads to likelihood of PTSD. Is that right?
Yeah, the absence of being able to integrate the killing in a useful way. You know, you have the revulsion and then the backlash of remorse, and then you deal with that and you come out the other end. But you know what I found as I dig in deeper, and this is important to understand, is that most people have already done that. They prepared it. We're not committing atrocities. We're not committing mass murders. This is lawful killing, and there's dynamics in place to take care of the individual. And so there's kind of some myths about the veterans of this war. Be okay if we take a minute and dig into those myths? Yeah. You know, there's a normal response to the act of killing. Hunters experience something similar. First is the exhilaration of the kill, the adrenaline rush. And then, you know, the hunter walks up to the dead creature, the cop, the military walks up to the person they just killed. And there's a backlash of remorse and nausea. And you have to deal with that. Hunter, you know, the hunter knows we're going to turn this into meat. We're going to feed my family. You know, it's going to be okay. And in combat, with the rightful, lawful killing, most people are able to process it fairly easily. It is a part of the equation, but you know, after the Parkland school massacre, I was contacted by this editor of a major newspaper. She said, "I read your book on killing. I'm going to do an editorial based on your book about how all these people are going to bought guns. At the moment of truth, they're not going to be able to use them. If they do use them, they'll be destroyed based on your book. I said, ma'am, you need to reread the book. To take an 18-year-old kid, to draft him off the street, send him to a distant land, have him ambush some poor guy and do him no harm, that can be hard. It takes training. And for a tiny percentage, it can be traumatic. To use violence to protect your loved ones, that's what we're wired to do. Of all the violence you can engage in, violence to protect your loved ones, your home, your cave, your tribe, if they came to you and they threaten you, that's something we could live with. And you know, of all the violence you can engage in, that's what we're wired to do, and it's the least traumatic thing that we can do. And we have endless cases of people using self-defense, righteously protecting their loved ones, and the vast majority have no problem with it. What really tends to blow people's minds are things like auditory exclusion and tunnel vision, the slow motion time, and memory gaps. You know, we talk about the murder rates being held down by medical technology. Look beneath the surface of things. The docs are saving ever more lives. If we had World War II level medical technology, the murder rate would be at least 10 times what it is. We had 1970s level medical technology, the murder rate would be at least 4 times what it is. Tourniquets alone have probably cut the murder rate in half in just the last decade. 10 years ago, nobody carried a tourniquet. Today, every cop carries a tourniquet. EMS has it. Civilians like me carry them everywhere. Cop slaps on a tourniquet, saves a life, he's prevented a murder. If 20 to 30 people a day slap on a tourniquet and save a life, we cut the murder rate in half. So the number completely misrepresent the problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back a sec because with what you shared about, I mean, I think most people, even the most sheepish of people, I think would like to think if their loved ones were in danger, they'd be able to pull the trigger, they'd be able to swing the hammer, stab the knife, whatever it is. Is the issue with modern warfare the scale? Because you and many historians have mentioned how World War I changed the scale of battle by some huge exponential number. You no longer saw the person invading your homeland, you're in a distant land. Everyone's anonymous. You don't even know your buddies sometimes. Is that the issue with the psychological trauma of warfare?
You know, it's kind of an interesting point that with the battle that we're in today in Iraq and Afghanistan, we've got a far smaller portion of our population. And they're not using airstrikes, and they're generally not using artillery, at least not effectively. And so it's a lot more bringing us back to 1800s type warfare. Even earlier than that. It's small groups who are finding and hunting down small groups. So you're right, this war is profoundly different. This is not hundreds of thousands of people in the trenches. This is not waves of tens of thousands being mowed down. This is a totally different kind of war. And we're evolving that way. In non-combat, I talk about the energy in the individual molecule. Think of the individual soldier as a molecule. You know, once upon a time, we were 2 blocks slamming against each other. And then the individual molecule gets up to a liquid, right? So now, instead of being a solid phase, we're liquid phase. And that's a maneuver warfare and World War I type cutting around the enemy. And now, the energy in the individual molecule, the one person, can call in airstrikes, call in precision artillery. They've got enormous energy that they can direct. And we're able to fight the battle with far less troops. And they're calling in airstrikes, and they're calling in artillery, and they're maneuvering. And we feel what I call the gaseous phase, where we now have enough energy that the individual molecule is actually a gas. And we got 3-dimensional battle. So we go from 2-dimensional planes, solid warfare, slamming each other. We go to fluid warfare, the next phase, and then we go to the gaseous phase. And we're really at a totally different part of warfare today. And it's an environment in which a squad of people calling in airstrikes, calling in artillery, maneuvering and firing with enormous effectiveness can accomplish what once upon a time a battalion accomplished. We're fighting a war with far less people.
It's wars become more personal again.
Yes. In many ways. But one of the things to understand, now there's some real myths about our veterans that I'd like to confront up front. And, you know, we've all heard 22 veterans a day take their life. And as best we can tell, that's probably accurate. But the word veteran and combat veteran are two different things. In World War One, and then in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, they drafted everybody. Elvis Presley was drafted. Elvis was a veteran. Most of these veterans are 70, 80, 90-year-old men. And one person called it self-euthanizing. You know, the suicide among our elderly is a very deep. Suicide everywhere has exploded. The new factor is sleep deprivation, creating impaired judgment, resulting in suicides worldwide exploding. Teen suicides, twin-age suicides. But 22 veterans a day is almost like a little anti-war myth that it's all from the current war. It's not. Only one or two of those 20, and one suicide's one too many, but only one or two of those 22 a day from the current war. The vast majority of our veterans, right? The veteran means anybody who served in the armed forces, are elderly old men from back in the day.
Oh, that's interesting.
Huge armies and drafted everybody. So, and then, you know, you hear people say, well, 8% of our prison population is veterans. Well, 24% of adult American males are veterans. Again, the idea that they're suicidal and homicidal, some do have problems, they deserve our help. But one other factor is PTSD. You know, I keep running into, I present at national, international psych conferences. Always some British psychiatrists. Well, you know, the British troops are running 5% PTSD. Why are the Americans so much higher? They're not. Go to the VA website, look up public health, PTSD in Iraq and Afghanistan. 16% of the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD. 11% of the ones who didn't deploy have PTSD. About 5% contract PTSD. The British studied their troops in Afghanistan. The Dutch studied their troops in Afghanistan. We keep coming back to about 5%. 10% of the adult population has some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. You push the right button and you get a post-traumatic response out of about 10% of the general population. Those who've been to war are 5% more likely to have PTSD. So the idea that there are suicidal, homicidal, PTSD-riddled nutcases is really a myth. The Vietnam veteran was called baby killer. They were spit on, they were attacked. It really did happen. Now the anti-war model's differently. They're all damaged goods. They're all broken, destroyed. Now that's not true. And we're good at treating PTSD. I worked with lone survivor, Marcus Dutrell. I trained his unit before the event and after the event. I talk about post-traumatic stress, like being overweight. Post-traumatic stress disorder is obese. We all kind of know the difference between overweight and obese. Post-traumatic stress disorder is debilitating. I trained Marcus Dutrell's unit. He went to Iraq. I got his permission to talk about him. His whole unit was wiped out. He was captured. He was tortured. Very bad things happened to that man. A year later, I trained in his unit. He wants to deploy again with his unit. He did. It was a good thing. And his doctor told me that Marcus Dutrell, Navy SEAL, came back from that incident and he was 500 pounds PTSD. Totally debilitated. A year later, he was 50 pounds PTSD. And he was about to deploy again with his unit. I said, look how far you've come in just the last year. Have confidence you can come farther. Today,
and what were
Marcus
some of the
Dutrell,
things that helped him go from the 500 to 50?
Well said. You know, one of it was to be in a constant, safe environment. You know, he's a twin. His twin brother was there with him constantly. And one of the things that we do is therapy. Today, one of the major things we do with therapy is this, right? In a nutshell, PTSD is every time you talk about it, every time you think about it, you're up here in sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight response. One of the tools to pull somebody from fight or flight to rest and digest is a big swig of water. And a deer's being chased by a wolf. Deer's being chased by a wolf. Did you get a drink? She's really thirsty. I can't get a drink. I'm being chased by a wolf. The fact of taking a drink sends a powerful message from fight or flight to rest and digest. And a friend of mine is one of our nation's leading therapists for federal law enforcement. And she talks about sitting down and talking about the event. And every time they become emotional, they take a big swig of water. She told me, 6 years of college, 14 years of practice, and that stupid bottle of water is doing more good thing I've ever done. Now, that's just one trick that I got in the bag. The breathing exercise I teach in my book is enormous. You don't always have a swig of water. You can always stop and take a breath. We're using food. You know, that lady I told you about has evolved now, the therapist. She now has a little fridge full of little individual servings of ice cream, every flavor. And they come and sit down. And she says, okay, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? I don't have time for ice cream. Here, come on, what's your favorite? Everybody goes, I don't know, what's your favorite flavor? Come on. Oh, all right, I like, mint chocolate chip. I got that. She reaches in the fridge, grabs mint chocolate chip, pulls the lid off, shoves a spoon in, hands it to the guy, grabs some for herself, said, now talk to me about what happened. Every time it starts to become emotional, have a bite. And so, you know, food, a drink of water, pulls us from fight or flight to rest and digest. Again, that doesn't always work. There's EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. You follow a visual stimulus while you're talking about it. You know, I talk about the brain having two parts. You got the human brain and the dog brain laid on top of each other. When you become extremely frightened, the human brain shuts down and the dog brain hijacks the human brain. And so what happens is you re-experience the event. And that swig of water, that food, that breathing brings us back down. But another trick, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming, you follow a visual stimulus. And while you're talking about the incident, and what happens is that the dog brain is busy. He's chasing a ball in the front yard while the human brain can talk about it and suddenly able to talk about these things without that dog brain reaching up and hijacking the human brain. So re-experience of the event is not PTSD, it's normal. How you deal with that will determine whether or not you get PTSD. And the goal is to separate the memory from the emotions.
It sounds like the replaying is like your unconscious trying to work it out, but I guess you just need the right environment or
and the worst
the ice
thing
cream.
you can do is to not think about it. You got to talk about it, you know, and talking over beer is really healthy. You know, you talk over beer and you start to become emotional. You take it, stop. Big swig of beer, regain control and keep talking. Physiologically, psychologically, just about the best thing you could possibly do until you get drunk, and then it gets counterproductive. Right? So these dynamics are in play. And Marcus Luttrell today, 100% post-traumatic stress-free. We're really good at treating PTSD. We get better every year. We have hundreds of thousands of cases we treat every year that recover fully. I trained a major SWAT team a while back. During the break, Kim, I said, hey, Colonel, the doc psyched this guy off the team. Now doc says, okay, can we trust him? Yes, you can trust him. He's stronger of the incident. He's got a piece of paper says he's sane. You got one of those? So just understand that these dynamics of the trauma that comes out of combat, the vast majority are just fine. Indeed, they're stronger of the experience. A new greatest generation are rising up. Here we are in the middle of the of this pandemic, and I tell you that we can be made stronger by these things. You know, the Depression and World War II created the greatest generation. 9/11 and this has the capacity to also create a great generation. People are empowered and strengthened by the experience. And this, Nietzsche said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." That he stole that from the Bible. 2,000 years before Nietzsche, the Bible said the same thing. Romans chapter 5, we glory in tribulation. For tribulation worketh patience, patience experience help, hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. So just understand that all these bad things in life, if we follow that archetypal model of the protector, if we focus our energies in that direction, A, when the bad things happen, we're far less likely to be shattered by it. And B, we're far better able to handle it in the event and after the event. We know the world can be a dangerous place. We know bad things can happen. When they happen, we're not destroyed. We're ready for it. And
awesome. Yeah.
We yearn for it.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something related because you shared a lot about video games, and I was actually appalled that you shared about the Paducah shooter who trained by video games and got 8 out of 8 headshots. I was shocked. And with young men, video games and pornography are on the rise. Male suicide is high. There's something related to like the sex and violence and young men, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that because obviously technology is new. Video games didn't exist 30 years ago, But also, I mean, I'm a 30-year-old guy, so I only know what I know. But
Oh,
it seems like previous generations had real challenges that most men had to
yes.
face, where maybe now we have to look for them
Yes.
and simulate them. I'm wondering what you had, what thoughts you had
Yeah.
on these
You know, you
trends.
really put your finger on a key dynamic. But another, if we peel the layers of the onion, the next layer down is the sleep deprivation that's involved with this. The video games are designed to put us in what's called a flow state. We become incapable of keeping track of time. We've all been there. Suddenly it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Got no idea where the last 6 hours went. And here's the key concept. 18 hours without sleep and your impaired judgment equal to 0.08 legally drunk. 24 hours without sleep, your impaired judgment equal to 0.10 above legally drunk. 2 nights without sleep, and you are psychotic. Any graduate of Army Ranger School will tell about hallucinations on the 3rd day without sleep. And we're in the middle of a worldwide epidemic of sleep deprivation. Social media, cell phones, and at the core of it, these incredibly, incredibly addictive video games. Right now, 200 million people are online playing the game. We do this, and 0.05% say, time to save the game and quit. So they never do that again. We do this, absolutely nobody quits. They do more of that. It is truly a computer-driven algorithm with hundreds of millions of data points that designs the game that's impossible to turn off. I tell the old timers, all the old timers, you remember Tetris? You know, think Tetris on steroid with crack. And each generation becomes more addictive. Research tells us 15% of all divorces in America, video games are the cause. 15%.
Wow.
Video games are the cause. So what I tell people is this: there's nothing wrong with adults playing any game, unless it gets away with your sleep or your health or your family or your job. You got to recognize that this game is going to put me in a flow state. To show up to work sleep deprived is not acceptable for an adult who accepts responsibility. Playing games all night long and going to work is not acceptable. And again, just like pornography, it can completely drain the well. And then when you need these resources, they're not there, but you have that sleep deprivation. So in the active duty military, our suicides have nothing to do with combat. A non-combat vet is likely to take the life as a combat vet. But some of the research tells us a sleep-deprived soldier can be up to 5 times more likely to take their life. Taking your life is not a natural act. You have to have profoundly impaired judgment to kill yourself. And alcohol and suicide has always been related. Alcohol creates impaired judgment. You make a bad decision, never get a chance to rethink it. But the most pervasive form of impaired judgment is sleep deprivation. Teen suicides, what tweeners, they call them teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. Teenage girls' suicide rate per capita has tripled in just the last decade. So here's parenting 101 for the 21st century. When you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. No laptop in the room, no cell phone in the room. They've got to go to the room and sleep. A cop came up to me on a break or one of my presentations. He said, I had a good girl. He said, she was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. So I trust her. I let her keep her cell phone. He said, a little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. And we never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying. He says, I understood my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand until now is that she was sleep deprived and tormented and bullied to death in front of my eyes, and I let it happen. He says, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How can I expect our kids to? He said, the one thing on earth I could have done for my little girl was take her cell phone every night, let her turn off the bad stuff in this world, and get a good night's sleep. So just recognize this dynamic. Traffic deaths, decade after decade, traffic deaths have come down. Airbags, seatbelts, and now traffic deaths are back up again. There's a reason why airline pilots and truck drivers are required by law to get enough sleep. So with our cops, the 2 greatest killers of our cops, suicide and traffic deaths. And if we gave a damn about it, the place we'd be focusing our energies is sleep management. So the third major cause of death that has exploded is drug overdoses. Just taking drugs is impaired judgment, but taking drugs when you are sleep deprived, but also the opiate epidemic. Why opiates? There are many different drugs out there. Prescription opiates have always been there. Why are they suddenly the drug of choice worldwide? Sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. The tendons and muscles never get a chance to fully relax. Doc, I heard all the time, give me a pill to fix. You don't need a pill. You need more sleep. I need to knock off the caffeine shortly after lunch because the caffeine stops us from getting deep cycle sleep. That's when the tendons and muscles fully relax. If you don't get sleep and if you don't get deep cycle sleep, you get chronic pain. And so sleep management is absolutely essential. And here's the key concept. Sleep is a biological blind spot. Our bodies don't know how to make us get enough sleep because it always happened naturally. Throughout history, for untold thousands of years, every night it got dark. It was dark and there was nothing to do. You had so much talking, so much sex, you went to sleep. Then Tommy Edison invented the light bulb and the television, the video game. Suddenly we go 24/7 and our bodies don't know how to make us get enough sleep. Our bodies are pretty good at getting air, food, water. Ever think how good the body is getting the right amount of food? How much extra food would a kid have to eat to put on 1 extra pound a month? If a kid puts on 1 pound a month, by the time he's 10, he's 120 pounds overweight. So as we get older, it gets harder. Our bodies are pretty good at getting air, food, water. Our bodies are incompetent at making us get enough sleep. We got to make it happen. We got to manage our sleep like we manage our money. And one thing that is incredibly valuable is the Fitbit, some kind of a sleep tracker. I think the Fitbit Charge 3 is best. It's waterproof, wear it in the shower, wear it in the pool. It'll track your heart rate. Really interested to see where your heart rate was in the middle of sex. It will track your calories. It will track your steps, and it will track your sleep and your cycles of sleep. It will rock your world. You download the app, you wear the wrist, you pull up the app, and it will tell you, you need 7 to 8 hours sleep a night as an adult. You've been getting 5 hours of sleep for the last 3 months. You're killing yourself. Stop doing that stuff. And we got to manage our sleep.
I want to ask you about sleep and stress inoculation because so I did a PLC split program in OCS. So I did 6 weeks in '07 and then 6 weeks in '09. And in '07, sleep deprivation was part of the training. In fact, the battalion commander would say, like, we're purposely sleep depriving you because it makes you more scared and you have to deal with that fear. And that made sense. I was basically almost hallucinating. I mean, you know, whatever. We had nights without sleep and whatnot. But in '09, it was completely different. Like, we actually got nap time. Before like the 18 milers, we would always have to sleep an extra 2 hours. I'm wondering if, like, did research come out in 2008 or something that shifted the military training?
It's just the steady evolution of us understanding how critical sleep is to our wellness. But there's something there that they weren't wrong the first time, but we're a little bit smarter the second time. In particular, if you're going to be to the range, if you're going to do anything dangerous, then we demand that they get a good night's sleep the night before. So, and that's the rule throughout our armed forces now. We can sleep deprive you, but if you're going to do something dangerous, like going to the range and having weapons, or mountain climbing in ranger school, we made sure they got enough sleep. So something to understand here is you cannot train your body to get by on less sleep. You know, at ranger school, I went days without sleep and days without food. Ranger school didn't teach me that I don't need food. Your body needs fuel. And if the body runs out of fuel, the car runs out of gas, it stops. But you'd be amazed how long you can go before you have to refill the tank. And you've gone 2 days without food and 2 days without sleep, and you're still going. You haven't trained your body to get by on less food. But if somewhere down the line, you're in a traumatic event, you don't get food, you don't get sleep, the little monkey brain doesn't panic. We all got that little monkey brain, that little dog brain back there. And you had no sleep and no food, and it panics. No food, no sleep. We've never been here before. This is not good. But if you've been there before, and you can be psychologically inoculated. So don't think that you are able to perform some Superman feat of going without food. But what you are able to do is control your mental response to going without food and not panic. And you control your mental response to going without sleep and not panic. But understand that you are a time of great risk when you're sleep deprived. You're impaired judgment. Suicides, traffic deaths, drug overdoses are all strongly related to sleep deprivation. So we choose a time, like for our own personal training, we go a day without food and a day without sleep. And for spiritual reasons, there's value in fasting. But nobody should know but you and maybe your ranger buddy or your partner, right? And you go to work and you go a day without food and a day without sleep. And you realize I can do this. I have control of my body. Now, I can't train my body to get by on less air. I can't train my body to get by on less fluids. But, Navy SEALs are trained not to go without air, but to not panic when they don't have air. You'll put our divers in any of our dive schools underwater, and they rip their hose off and they make them do something, usually knots, tying knots underwater. And they're running out of air. And you and I hit that point, we're out of air, and we'll panic and maybe breathe in air, but they won't. They'll keep doing it right up till the minute they lose consciousness. Now, they haven't trained their body to get by on less air. They trained their body to not panic until the body absolutely runs out of air and they lose consciousness. Do you understand?
Yeah, and this reminds me of an interesting point you had in on combat on how trainers should teach the soldiers not to die, like when you get hit.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was so fascinating because I haven't been in combat, but I can imagine, or I've played combat sports, and so much of winning and losing sometimes is just deciding that you won or lost. Like you see this in wrestling all the time.
Yes.
And I was curious if you could share a little bit on that.
When we do our force-on-force engagements, airsoft, paintball, these are good things for developing our skills. It's called reality-based training. And there's reality. You get hit and it hurts. Now, if you're going to do airsoft, wear eye protection. You're going to do paintball, wear the mask. We're going to do this intelligently. But what happens is we do force-on-force engagements, but simunition is where we fire a real bullet out of a real gun. What leaves a barrel is not a chunk of lead, but plastic marking capsule. It's going 350, 400 feet per second. It hits you in the hand, it hurts. It hurts a lot. So firefighters have to encounter real Bernie Yowie fire in training. We can't train a firefighter for a lifetime with flickering lights, and red tissue paper and a fan. And we've got to encounter real Bernie Yowie bullets to prepare for a real gunfight. And what happens is we tell people, we don't train you to die. We don't give permission to fail. I've been shot, I'm dead. No, you're not. Officer Jennifer Fulford shot 10 times, killed the two best shot her. It's only fair. Back on the job 6 months later. You understand? Mm-hmm. So we can survive if we just stop the next bullet. And we don't give people permission to die. We train people to keep going. And so this is a form of stress inoculation there. But you really hit something important about combat training and combat sports. In any healthy play, bang, bang, I got you. He said, no, you didn't. You smacked with the air cap gun. It leaves a mark and he cries. Everybody gather around the hurt kid and try to convince him not to tell mom. Somebody gets hurt, the play stops. A basketball game, a football game, one of the players gets hurt, the play stops. In the video game, you blow your playmates' heads off and explosions of blood. Does the play stop? You get in trouble. You get points. This is pathological play. This is dysfunctional play. Now again, there's nothing wrong with adults playing any game unless it gets away with your sleep or your life. You decide what's important. Is my life important or is this game important? So nothing wrong with playing the game. Set a timer. Play the game for an hour or two. Ding, the timer goes off. Use your Steely Warrior discipline. Save the game and move on. I play a major, massive, metamorphic, online, orgasmic game. You can't do anything an hour or two a night. It's cool. It's cool. Decide now what's important. Is your health important? Is your spouse important? Your children important? Your job important? Is your responsibility as an adult important? Or is that game what's really important? Because that's cool. If the game is really important, here's what you do. Quit your job right now. Move into your parents' basement. Draw unemployment. buy a Johnny economy-sized bag of Cheetos, play video games all night long. Millions of people are doing that. But you want to have a life. You want to uphold your responsibility as a spouse, as a worker, to your fellow and to your employees and to your society. You got to get those games under control.
Yeah, I think one thing that's hard for younger people is when, I mean, I think most young men going through puberty have an impulse, obviously, to have sex, but they also have an impulse to fight battles or hunt or something, and it's just not available. And if they're a loser in school or they perceive themselves to be, the video game world is just more fun and real, and I think that's one of the challenges.
It is, because when your virtual world is more fun than the real world, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you read, there's nothing wrong with reading. You escape in a good book every night, there's nothing wrong with that. You escape in a video game, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you read all night long and show up to work sleep deprived, it's not acceptable. And if you play in that game all night long and you show up to work sleep deprived, that's not acceptable. So most of us, we'll read for an hour, maybe no more than an hour at night. We'll read and we'll go to bed. But the video games trap you. And you got to have that discipline that says, no, a good night's sleep is also critically important. And understand, especially with kids, that the video game is pathological play, it's dysfunctional play. Bang, bang, I got you. Somebody gets hurt, the play stops. But now you inflict pain and suffering on your opponent, and you get points. And what we're really doing is, yes, we're raising killers. All of these killers have played these games. We're also raising bullies, people who have been taught to take pleasure from inflicting suffering on others. And so as much as we can, healthy play. I talked to a guy a little while back. He said, here we are in this pandemic, we're in our home with my kids. We're doing a lot of neat things. We get up every morning, we do PT. He said, but we do martial arts. He said, how can I train him that, firearm skills? I can't go to the range. I said, man, go to Walmart. Walmart's still open. Buy Nerf guns, buy airsoft guns, wear hearing protection, wear eye protection rather, and practice your engagements with the kids, slicing the pie and airsoft games. And when one of the kids gets hurt, oh, Dad, that hurt. Hey, we'll stop the game for a minute. What did we learn here? That hurts. And that's healthy play. So, rather than the video game, you and your kids playing with dart guns. And, my kids, I got teenage grandchildren now, but when my kids were little, they learned never point a gun at grandpa within arm's reach. We always had dart guns and Nerf guns, action, reaction. If it's within reach, you can take that gun away before they pull the trigger every time. When I was younger, I was really more intensely into the martial arts. I could kick the gun out of their hand before they pull the trigger every time. Now I'm not so good at kicking anymore, but I can still do that disarm within arm's reach. Now my grandkids all know, never point a gun at grandpa within arm's reach. He'll take it away every time before you can pull the trigger. Dart guns, Nerf guns, airsoft, they don't matter. Action, reaction, take that gun away before they pull the trigger. What did they learn at a young age? Keep your distance. When you've got a gun, distance is our friend. You understand? And so we learn these skills in a healthy way. You and your kids clearing the room, and with your airsoft guns, with your Nerf guns. We got Nerf gun battles in the house, and we learn to use cover and movement. These are good things. This is healthy play. Playing video games all night long, being sleep deprived, learning to take pleasure from inflicting death and suffering, time out. For adults in controlled amounts, not a bad deal. For children, obsessively, day after day, this is not good. And we can do a better job for our kids. We can focus on healthy play.
Yeah. So is the video game thing, because I'm sure you didn't really commented on like differences between genders, but certainly there have never been young girls who shot up schools.
Well, there has. Actually.
Oh, there has. Okay.
Yeah, there have been a few. They're considerably rare. There have been a few. There was one in San Diego who shot up a elementary school across the street from her house. Shot a lot of kids, 2 dead. But yes, they are quite rare. You're exactly right. It's almost the exception that proves the rule. And there's been a lot of question about why that is. Is it testosterone poisoning? Is it role model focusing? Well, there's a lot involved in that. But again, boys are inclined to actual violence. Girls are much more inclined to bullying. vicious bullying. And girls can take away from this something different. They're more inclined to some really vicious bullying dynamics and pathological relationship dynamics. Boys and girls have to be given healthy models and healthy play. You were saying, go ahead.
Yeah, but with all these, like, whether it's emotional bullying or actual violence, it's not that video games teach it out of thin air. It's like there's something in our wiring that is prone. And you did speak in both of your books about like ego bravery versus, I forget the terms you use, but versus like actual a sense of duty. But even like there's like I enjoy first person shooter games. Like there's something rewarding when you make the hit or anything like that. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, like, we do have like a primal impulse. It's possible to enjoy killing or violence. Like, what's the deal with that?
Yeah. You know, the critical thing here is there are predisposing factors. A friend of mine wrote a book, Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer, a terribly important book, Phil Chalmers. And he studied hundreds of these teen killers. And every single one of them have been obsessed with the video games. But what he says is that there's millions who are obsessed with video games who didn't kill. So he's got how to create a teen killer in 10 easy steps. All the old problems are still there. Broken families, access to weapons, bullying. All the old factors are still there, and they're still important. But you start stacking up the old factors and you add one new factor, the video games, and it's a tipping point that pulls it over the top. So every one of these, I'm talking hundreds of these teen killers, every one he's ever interviewed is obsessed with the violent movies, violent television shows, and violent video games. And again, there's millions of people like that. Only a tiny handful kill, but what you've done is you've created a tipping point. You have added one more factor to the equation. It's a factor we can do something about, but there is within us a desire for a righteous battle. And that whole dynamic of seeking that role model. And that's why our Sheepdog Kids book, we got Sheepdogs. It's a children's book, Meet America's Heroes. And it talks about channeling your energy as a protector. There are wolves, and there are sheep, they're healthy people, but they've got little capacity for violence. Then there's a wolf who will feed on the sheep. And the sheepdog is the one who will protect the sheep. And that talks about being a sheepdog. And it talks about the sheep will die to protect the ones they love. Only a sheepdog loves enough to die for other people's loved ones. And sometimes
a wolf and a sheepdog are certainly more similar. Just one has empathy and the other doesn't, right?
Line.
Is that because
when we take
some of the stories you shared in your book? Oh, go ahead.
No, when we take this triad, the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog, everybody is somewhere in between. There's a line between the wolf and the sheepdog. There's a line between the sheepdog and the sheep. And everybody's somewhere along that continuum. You know, like a triad, and you can place yourself somewhere within that triad. You know, you're over here, heavy sheepdog, in between sheepdog and wolf. And if you're in between sheepdog and wolf, there's nothing wrong with that. But you want to feed the sheepdog and not the wolf. You want to nurture that protection, and stay away from that evil dynamic of the sheepdog and move yourself of the wolf. You want to stay away from the wolf and feed the sheepdog. You want to move in that direction. Embrace the role of a protector. Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. It's just interesting because in many killer detective fictional movies, a lot of the times the theme is that the detective and the killer are actually very similar. One just happened to be on the police force. The other one just happened to be...
One has chosen to be on the police force, and the other has chosen to be a criminal. And so that's where the major line is. In the end, I control my body doesn't control me. I control my life, whether it's orgasm control or other dynamics. The whole thing is to become the master of your body and your mind. I control my body, I control my mind. And it's a lifelong process. I'm 63 years old and I'm still getting better every day at being a better person, at controlling my anger, at controlling my dynamics. As we get older and older, we get better and better as people. We should strive to constantly be better people. And You know, as a sheepdog, I'm invested in the martial art of the firearms called Jiu-Jitsu. And one thing we know is we'll grow old and we'll grow fat, but we can still be one hell of a shot. And you know, and I'm too old to engage deeply in the martial arts anymore. But I'm a hell of a shot, you know, and I'm too old to take an ass whooping. You know, just it's coming right down to gunfight, right up front for me, you know. But you know, what I keep talking to people is look beneath the surface of things. Look beneath the surface of killing, the surface of combat. That's what books are about. You know, the murder rate completely misrepresents the situation. Medical technology holding down the murder rate, boom, we all accept that automatically. Why didn't we know that? There's things beneath the surface. And I tell you, the one that's my model is the necktie. You know, the necktie, it starts down at your crotch. It goes up to your neck. It's got a big knob on top. It's a dick. It really is. And you get a big red power tie. And I tell my cops, I say, you and your partner knock on the front door. You're detectives. You're wearing your suit. You know, you got your dick on. And the guy answers the door, and the monkey brain says, ooh, ooh, ooh. And it works. There's a reason why the necktie has been in fashion for 100 years. Fashions come and go. The necktie stayed in fashion. It works. But, you know, and women almost never wear a necktie. When they do, it's demeaning, like a waitress or something. They wear a necktie. It's demeaning. The monkey brain looks at a woman with a necktie and says, huh, what's that? And so understand that what's going on here. And I want to get credit for being the first one to say, dude, why are we wearing these dicks, you know? And I tell you, 100 years from now, they will look at photographs of the president wearing the big red power tie, and they'll laugh at him. Said, didn't they understand what they were doing? Didn't they understand? They're all wearing dicks. Why are they doing this? Couldn't they see it? No, they couldn't see it. So look at the surface of things. And I tell you, I didn't get this from anybody. I want credit for being the first one that says, why are we wearing these dicks? I visited the White House and I was wearing my little cowboy string tie, you know, because a cowboy, you don't play that game. See, the guy with the bow tie, he said, I'm not playing the game. And we all go to dinner, right? We put our tuxedos on, we all put our bow tie on. It says, we're going to be chill. We're going to suave and do boner here. We're going to set aside, you know, the old dick game, and we're all going to agree. And, you know, somebody shows up with a tie. Somebody else is wearing a bow tie at dinner. It's incredibly out of place. And again, that little string tie that the cowboy wears says, man, I'm not playing your game. I got my dick right here, you know, the old pistol, yeah. But just look beneath the surface of things. That's what books are about. And my newest book will be out any day now. It's called On Spiritual Combat. You know, a lot of people can recognize there is a force for evil in this world. And you are helpless in fighting that force for evil if you do not tap into force for good. On Spiritual Combat comes from a traditional Christian perspective, but it really is a powerful tool. And the mechanisms our ancestors used to fight evil, if there is a God, they haven't changed, you know, across the years. And the mechanisms that have been used across the centuries continue to be of value in this spiritual warfare. So it's all about digging deeper, looking beneath the surface, but choose to be a sheepdog and not a wolf. Choose to be a protector. I think one of the things coming out of this whole dynamics of the pandemic is our understanding deep in our soul. The cops are not always going to be there. The government cannot always protect you. You have to accept responsibility for protecting yourself and protecting your loved ones. Does it mean going to martial arts? Does it mean being in good physical condition? Does it mean carrying pepper spray? If you're in the right place with the right training, does it mean carrying a gun? I can't tell you what's right for you, but I can tell you everybody is ready to move further up that scale of preparation. And that comes back to you and this podcast. The world is going to need what you have to give. The world is going to come to you and people like you, seeking wisdom, seeking knowledge, and this idea of tapping into that primal archetypal model of a positive, masculine protector, sheepdog model. What you're doing is very powerful stuff. And you need to believe in it. And all the people who are working with you need to understand and believe in what you're doing. So does that all
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned so many things. I want to ask you about them all, but I'll go backwards. Because on the civilian front, I mean, your books reference police officer experiences and war combat experiences, but I'm sure most of the people who read them will not have experiences like that, but any of us could have an assailant try to enter our home or anything like that.
Yes.
Maybe unlikely, but it can happen. And when
Oh,
I
yes.
listen to the stories in your book, I always wonder, and even with, I didn't choose to go to the Marines. I think that was the right
Yeah.
choice, but I still always wonder what I would
Yeah.
be like under
Yeah.
fire, because I can't
Yeah.
know. What do you suggest to civilians?
Well, the same thing applies across the board. I'll give you an example now. The thing is, it's easy to get these narratives from military and law enforcement. It's harder to get it from civilians. Over the years, I've collected quite a few, but I'll give you a great example. Now, cops have better tactics, better training, better body armor. Cops have better technology, saving lives. When we talk about cops murdered, the best measure is what I call the year-over-year increase in cops murdered. And 2016 was the worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered in history. 5 cops murdered in one incident in Dallas, 4 cops murdered in Baton Rouge. It was just the tip of the iceberg. We also had bad guys going to the cop's house to murder their family. But Mama Bear protecting her cubs can be one of the most dangerous things on the planet. And the cop's wife killed this guy, game over. And she told me I had no problem killing that guy to protect my family. And women very seldom are troubled by having to kill, because when women do it, they do it in a powerful protective mode. But she said, I heard the audio recording of my 911 call. And to this day, I have no memory making that call. It was eating me alive. And then somebody gave me a book on combat, page 55. Look, it's normal. Half of all trained seasoned cops have memory gaps. Boom, she was fine. She was just fine. Psychologists call it normalizing. It's too trivial a term for something so powerful. She heard the audio recording of a 911 call. She doesn't remember doing it. It was driving her crazy. We show her, it's normal, and she was fine. So all of these dynamics also apply every bit as much in a civilian life and death event. It could be a fist fight. It can be somebody trying to mug you, and your heart rate is running, and then you re-experience the event the next day, and that's normal. And Grossman warned me that might happen. One of the most important things is the breathing exercise. I have files organized by topic of emails and case studies, and the breathing exercise has saved the most lives, has had the greatest impact. A lady who's intubated and she's gasping and she's having trouble controlling herself, and she writes on a notepad and hands it to her president, says, Grossman, breathing. The breathing exercise Grossman taught us, and he starts coaching her. All right, in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out through the lips, 2, 3, 4, and she regains control. Just 3 weeks ago, I got an email from a guy. He said, I went to Iraq, saw a lot of combat, having a little difficulty coming home and shrugging it off. You're doing a lot of adventure training, mountain climbing, adventure training. I'm up on a camp high on a glacier, in a mountain glacier. And I get up at night disoriented. And I'm just wandering around. I didn't have crampons to stay on the ice. I didn't have proper equipment. I'm getting up in the night disoriented. And I remembered you. I heard your voice say, breathe in through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. You said, I heard your voice. I used my breathing, and I realized I was just about 2 steps from walking off a cliff. And the breathing literally saved my life. So these are non-combat experiences of people being able to apply these dynamics, whether it's an intruder in your home, whether it's waking up in the middle of the night disoriented and walking off a cliff, the breathing exercise, through predisposing factors, the inoculation dynamics, they all apply across the board. Anybody,
there's so many fascinating. I didn't know. I mean, I was aware of tunnel vision, and I was aware of the pant wetting and stuff like that. But there's one. I forget what the term was, but I think over 145 beats per minute, a lot of people lose their ability to move unilaterally.
Well, about 180. Yeah,
180,
losing
okay.
the ability to move unilaterally. And it's very important. I tell people, a lot of us have done exercise, get our heart rate up really high, and your face is generally flushed. You have a darker complexion, not quite so obvious. Having everybody, your face is flushed. But when the heart rate is pounding and your face goes white, again, if you have a darker complexion, not quite so obvious. But what's happening is vasoconstriction. So exercise-induced heart rate can be a totally different dynamic than fear or adrenaline-induced heart rate. So we can kind of stimulate it with exercise. We can create our heart pounding and perform actions under those circumstances. And that's a good thing. But it's all the difference in the world. I use a photograph in my class of Christopher Amoroso coming down from the World Trade Center on 9/11. On his second trip down, he's practically carrying this pregnant woman down. Just Google Christopher Amoroso and look at the images of him carrying that woman down. Her face is beet red. His face is bone white. You take it below the left cheekbone, and you see that left cheekbone is red. On the other side of the head is a pretty bad cut. He's been burned. And what I tell people is their heart rate could be exactly the same. The impact on their body is exactly the opposite. Her face is beet red. His face is bone white. So it's adrenaline induced. We can simulate it with exercise, and that's a good drill. Get your heart rate up and then perform those combat actions, whatever they may be, and while your heart's pounding. And that's good. But don't fool yourself into thinking it's exactly the same as a life and death event. And two different dynamics.
Yeah.
But you're right, when it's exercise-induced heart rate above about 180 beats per minute, you really begin to get some catastrophic dynamics. And one of the things, as you say, is at very high levels, what we end up doing is we lose the capability to do something with just one hand. And your ability to draw and fire a weapon, unless you drilled it. We don't just hold the gun out, we punch it out with two hands, and there we're tapping into the dynamic of both arms working together. And even under extreme stress, that skill becomes more available. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, because if you're fighting a bear or something, you don't need to do separate complicated things. Yeah, I was curious about that, and I share that with my girlfriend because we both train jujitsu, and she's actually been training a little bit longer than me. But she's very technically proficient, but she's the victim of sexual assault from her past. And she goes into panic anytime she's sparring with a bigger man. Like, she forgets what she's doing. Her hands end up doing the same thing. And I shared that from the book with her because there must be some stress response. I was wondering if you had thoughts on how to get over that. Yeah.
How's she been? Is she able to overcome that? Is she making progress?
She's making progress, but I think she's frustrated because she practices very well, but when she's stressed and rolling with a strong person, she goes into panic mode and then forgets what she's doing.
So this is a great opportunity to bring her to a higher level. Stop, take a swig of water, or stop and breathe. In through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out through the lips, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. Now do it. When you see her starting to get in that panic mode, just have her stop, breathe, regain control, and do it. Remember, never send a loser off your training site. Do whatever you have to do to make her be successful, whether it's be very slow, whether it's complying with her, and then go further and further along and build up. It's a perfect example where you can apply all these techniques to bring her to a higher level, overcome. And what you're looking at, to a certain degree, can become a post-traumatic response. She's re-experiencing the event of fighting somebody stronger with her. Her heart rate goes up, she loses control. Well, and again, it is not necessarily PTSD, it can become PTSD over time. So what you do is you work your way through that. You stop, take a swig of water, stop and breathe, freeze in place, breathe and regain control. Great opportunity to be able to apply all these things to bring her to a greater level of wellness, to control this dynamic and come out the other end stronger. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's fascinating. Are you familiar with the winner effect? Have you heard of that term?
Tell me more about it.
Yeah, it's when someone perceives that they won a challenge, their testosterone and dopamine spike up, but they also develop more receptors in their nervous system for testosterone. So like winning can compound in that way. And it was interesting because you shared basically that idea when you're speaking about the semi-munitions training. You never want to train dying or anything like that. And it's interesting because this keeps coming up, I think, in culture. Like I had Brett Jones, who teaches the kettlebell training, and their philosophy is the same. You don't train till failure because you don't want to practice failure. So it's interesting that this is kind of an across the board principle. It seems to be true.
And again, there's a winning effect. There's also a losing effect. We see teams get in a slump. We see teams getting trapped in a slump, and they know what's happening. They're just having trouble breaking that cycle. So, like I said, never to send a loser off your training site. Working with your girlfriend there, never let her lose. Try to let her win. Try to continue to evolve and move along with these dynamics. Give her winning situations and build her confidence, and steadily, gradually allow her to overcome this. You've really done 3/4 of the job. You've identified the problem. Now, solving the problem is the easy part. You know what to do. You know how to do it. And later on, tell me how that worked out.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, I'll shoot you a message.
It's just such a beautiful example to use all the things that you teach and that I teach to bring another human being to a higher state of wellness, to overcome that sympathetic nervous system response, and to allow her to have deeper levels of control. And what it means is, I now control my body. My body doesn't control me. And that's one of the greatest achievements we can give anybody. The breathing, the swig of water. My body doesn't control me. I control my body. It comes back to sleep. The snooze alarm is not our friend. The first act of every day to hit the snooze alarm is surrender to your body. Or it's the first act of every day to roll out of bed and take charge of your body. Give a kid a marshmallow. Say, you need this marshmallow right now, but I'll be back in 3 minutes for another one. You don't need it, and have them both. That is one of the greatest predictors of success in life. It's called self-control. Right. Hitting the snooze alarm is the opposite of self-control. I tell people, I'm in charge of my body. Muhammad Ali, boxer, great champion. He said, championship began every day the alarm went off. He hated running so bad, he put his running shoes on top of the alarm. The alarm went off, he grabbed his running shoes, that champion willpower. And so this whole dynamic of I'm in charge of my body. I tell people, don't touch that snooze alarm. Do some research. You're actually doing harm to your body as your body tries to learn to fall into deep cycle sleep in 10 minutes. Set 10 alarms, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6. By the time you turn off all those alarms, you're up. And the you that goes to bed at night has got to make you that get up in the morning, get out of bed. So from the crack of dawn, when the alarm goes off, we continue to strive to say, I control my body didn't control me. Does that video game trap you? Are you up until 3 o'clock in the morning? Well, you've let that game control you. I control my body, right? You let that game control you. You set a time, you set aside time for sleep, and you become control of your environment. If the video game traps you, then you need to overcome that and be able to do it as an adult in measured amounts that don't eat into your sleep time, don't eat into your work time, eat into your life. Sleep-deprived people will do things and say things that we'll regret for the rest of their life. Sleep-deprived people, we're not the parent we want to be, we're not the spouse we want to be, we're not the boss or the employee we want to be when we're sleep-deprived. So the ultimate dynamic of controlling our body comes back to the one thing we do every night, is that little vacation at the end of every day is sleep. Guard your sleep, protect your sleep. Use caffeine.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah, cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. And remember, chronic pain, sleep deprivation, and caffeine abuse, these are major factors in chronic pain. Cut down on the caffeine after lunch. Just cut off caffeine after lunch. Start getting a good 7-8 hours sleep every night, and watch that chronic pain go away. And watch your quality of life vastly improve as you focus on controlling your body and striving for wellness and having that whole full life that we all desire.
That's great. Yeah, and I mean, I know you reference stoicism in your books quite a bit. I mean, a lot of this is discipline and creating order where there is none. It sounds like. Yeah. I want to ask you about you touched on the spiritual side of combat. I have a couple questions on that. One is a bit of an ethical question, because when you frame it as good and evil, I think most of us can identify. Of course, we want to be on the side of good and combat evil. But I was listening to an interview with Dakota Meyer, who was a Medal of Honor recipient, and he was sharing about how, I think it was after he had just killed an enemy with a rock or something, and he was sharing how he actually like felt bad for the person because this guy, we call him a terrorist, but he's a warrior too, doing the best he knows how to do to defend his turf. Like they just happen to be on different teams or different cultures. I'm curious what you think about that, because like this brothers in arms thing across the battlefield seems to be something that comes up a lot in more memoirs and stuff. Yeah.
You know, what were the dynamic factor in combat is men and women don't do what they do to save their lives. They do it to save their comrades' lives. The most powerful bond in the battlefield, and it goes back to ancient hunters. You know, we're trying to take down a mammoth as a team. And if your comrades are hurt, then the whole team is hurt. You know, and so we learn to sacrifice for the team, to support the team. You put a bunch of people in combat together. Men and women don't know each other, don't care about each other. As soon as it's dark, as soon as people are dying, they're out of there. We put together a band of brothers and sisters, men and women who know and trust one another. They'll fight long and hard for each other. Audie Murphy is the most decorated American soldier in World War II. He was asked one time why he did. The answer is very simple. They were killing my friends. They were killing my friends. So the most powerful motivation, it comes down to four-letter word, love. The most powerful motivation on the battlefield is love. People don't lay their life down for their nation or some higher value. They lay their life down for their comrades. Dakota Myers, an incredible story of great valor, protecting his fellow Marines, his brothers and sisters, the others around him, you understand? Or his fellow troops. And so we keep coming back to love as one of the single greatest motivating factor on the planet. The mama critter will fight to the death to protect her babies, her young. And she won't die for anybody else's babies. But the sheepdog will lay their life down for strangers, for people they never met before. You know, and so there's a higher level of love there. I'm 63 years old. I retired from the Army 23 years ago. I've been on the road truly over 200 days a year, 200 nights a year, sometimes almost 300 nights a year on the road. Waiting at home for me is my bride of 44 years, my high school sweetheart. She was 15 when I proposed to her. I was 17. Well, I tell people we are from Arkansas. And 2 years later, she married a crazy Army paratrooper. Been this ride me for 44 years. I love her more than life itself. But for the last 23 years, I get home one, maybe 2 nights a week, conjugal visit, clean underwear, back in the road. Because the only people on earth more precious than my bride are my grandchildren. And we believe if we love our children, if we love our grandchildren, we love our nation, we'll give 100%. It's my prayer I can do this for another 20 years. Every day I have the health, every day that somebody wants to hear what I got to give, I'm going to go do it. Because the thing about love is, the worse it gets, the more determined you become to give it all you got. And I tell all of us, as we love our nations, we love our comrades, as we love our family, our children, we got to dedicate ourselves to giving 100%. And love is that greatest motivator of all. Who do we love? What do we love? And dedicate our lives to protecting that sheepdog, that protector model. It's one of the most powerful places we can focus our energies. And love is the defining characteristic on the battlefield that motivates people to lay their life down. Greater love is no one than this, to give their life for their friends. But there's many ways to give your life. Sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. To place the welfare of others ahead of your own. To walk out every day of your life, to do a dirty, dangerous, thankless job to the utmost of your ability, because you know if nobody did it, a civilization will no longer exist. Not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. And most of us therein lies the greatest life.
Do you think sheepdogs are more fulfilled than sheep?
I think so. I think, you know, the sheepdog, especially when bad things come down, and bad things happen to everybody eventually, the sheepdog is far better prepared. The sheep, their defense is denial. The sheepdog's defense is preparation, right? Training, equipment. You know, I wrote a lot about atrocity in my book on killing. And a lady interviewed me one time, and she talked about 3 different people who wrote incredible books about atrocity and then took their lives. Lady who wrote the book, The Rape of Nanking, which I tap into in my book a fair amount. A couple other books on Nazi killers. And they wrote these vivid, powerful books about this evil, the Rape of Nanking, the Nazi death camps. And then they killed themselves. And she said, well, have you been harmed by your? I said, no, because I'm a warrior. I'm a sheepdog. And when I see things like that, all it does is motivate me to train. You know, I'm a reserve cop. I've always got a gun on me. Phil Chalmers, Phil Chalmers wrote the book, Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer. Phil has an amazing class where he trades about mass murders. And he tells people about, and he shows crime scene photos, crime scene photo after photo of this family horribly murdered, women and children and father murdered. You look at these crime scene photos and cops are empowered by this. Civilians are shattered by it. All those things did to me was renewed determination to carry a weapon and to hit the range. I'm a sheepdog. I've got skills. I can confront this evil. I'm a better shot. I'm faster out of the draw. I have the tools. All this thing does to me as a sheepdog is motivate me to train more and to prepare more. But if you're a sheep and you see evil, what can you do? What can you do?
Yeah,
Well,
it's kind of a luxury to be a sheep. Culturally,
yeah,
I mean, we probably have more now than ever because a couple hundred years ago, we all had to carry a weapon just because.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I thought
now
that.
that's
Good.
coming out of the pandemic is we'll see a lot more people, even if they don't even know the term, you're going to see a lot more people choosing to be a sheepdog coming out of this pandemic dynamic of bad things happening all around us. And it will remind us what our ancestors knew, that we got to be prepared. You were saying, go ahead, please.
I was just, yeah, when you were explaining the different condition levels, condition white, yellow, red,
Yeah.
and I think I forget what words you used, but condition white was a state that no sheepdog should ever really be in. It's maybe a overly parasympathetic state, but that's kind of the luxury that sheepdogs give civilians, right? Like they get to be in that state all the time because someone else is walking the perimeter.
Oh, that's well said. Yeah, that's part of the equation. But they can make a choice. You know, we wrap up the Sheepdog Kids book by saying, you know, in nature, sheep are born as sheep and dogs are born as dogs, and wolves are not really bad. They're an important part of nature. But people are different. People are whatever they want to be. Have you got what it takes to be a sheep? And that's how we wrap up the book. You know, this is just a metaphor. It's just a model.
Right.
And it's not yes or no. It's a continuum. And we can take a few steps up that continuum. But the thing to understand is that preparation saves us twice. It saves us once physically. We have the tools, we have the skills, and we're triumphant. It saves us twice psychologically, because even if we fail, we can live with ourselves. We'll do everything we can do. Preparation saves us twice. Denial kills us twice. Kills us once physically. You don't have the tools, you don't have the skills, and you die like any other sheep. But even if you survive, you live the rest of your life in hell when there's simple things you could and should have done. So it's all about preparation and taking a few steps up the path and embracing that sheepdog model, the warrior archetype, the protector archetype. And that's so much of what you're doing. That's why I think I'm so excited about what you're contributing. You know, your jiu-jitsu, your martial arts background, I control my body, you know, with orgasm control or other dynamics. My body doesn't control me. And we explore and we understand and we're prepared to defend our loved ones, and we accept responsibility to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones.
I was curious if you had any final thoughts on, so for the average guy listening to this who's never seen combat, maybe never trained in anything, but he's recognizing like, oh, wow, I need to tap into this. I need to be able to be a sheepdog, but he has no relationship to violence. He has like, what would you say to someone who is starting from scratch, but he's an adult?
First off, that's a beautiful and wonderful thing, because you're already 3/4 of the way there, right? I really am a big believer in the martial arts. And Americans love the martial arts. You know, bowling leagues, and America's not very competitive. 20 million people in the martial arts, only a couple thousand actively compete, but striving for that next belt. That's something we can handle. I think one of the great growth industries in the near future is Hojutsu, the martial art of the firearm. HOJUTSU.com, Hojutsu.com. And the guy that put it together, he's a ranger right at the end of Vietnam. He's most decorated Alaska State Trooper. He's one of only 30-odd grandmaster pistol shots on the planet. Jeff Hall, high-level martial artist, multiple skills. And he's resurrected the Japanese art of the firearm. And I thought it was good. I'm a gun sight, you know, trained and front sight trained and military trained. And they do 3-day weekends. And I go to one a year and kind of co-sponsor it and add my 2 bits. But I went to a 3-day weekend. It begins in the dojo and transitions to the range. And at the end of the 3 days comes back to the dojo. But I barely made brown belt by the skin of my teeth. I knew what shots I was missing. I knew the time hacks. I trained for 2 years to get my black belt. And so this idea of striving for the next belt, I would encourage people, find the local martial arts instructors in your community. You know, the jujitsu are good stuff. You know, a lot of other things that we could be doing. Strive for the martial arts. Think about pepper spray as a good step in the right direction. Shot of pepper spray and run, you know. If you want to come further up that continuum, if you choose to carry a gun, if it's legal and lawful where you live, then seek training. Don't just carry a gun, seek training. And there's good people out there that will train you. It's one of the best investments you can ever make. It's not the gun. What kind of gun should I have? You know, the kind of gun doesn't matter all that much. What matters is up here, the training, the skills, the abilities. And so we encourage people, if you're going to choose to carry a gun, then seek that training. Because there's people everywhere. Go to any range, you'll find, you know, if you wanted to golf, you'd find a golfing pro. You wouldn't just buy golf clubs and stagger out there and start whacking things. You'd have somebody teach you. If you're going to carry a gun, then seek that training. And I think that firearms training is going to be the great growth industry in the coming years. Martial arts training and the mental side of the house, what you're doing, is also a critical piece of that equation. Does that all make sense? The things we could be doing right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would you recommend Jiu-Jitsu to someone who has very limited firearms training? Or is that...
Yeah, you can walk in the door as a white belt, knowing absolutely nothing. Do the 3-day weekend, come out the other end as a green belt. You know, you can, you know, and those first couple of days, the degree of skill is explosive. And then as you get to higher and higher levels of skills, it becomes more and more difficult. But we can teach the basics in a 3-day class, and it's brilliant stuff. It will transform your world. It will rock your world.
I've been meaning to get some training because my cousin taught me how to shoot on his farm, and I'm sure I have really terrible habits when it comes to pistols or everything.
In July, this July in South Bend, Indiana, go to the hujitsu.com. I'm kind of guest instructor, co-instructor for a little 3-day weekend, and come on down. Because I tell you, people take you from the ground up, drawing, safety, dynamics, move and fire, and Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. We're closing on 30 of the Jiu-Jitsu practitioners who've been in real world gunfights, most from cops, and we got a 98%, a little over 98% hit rate in real world events with the Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. That's astounding. Nobody has those kind of hit rates. And so the mechanism has proven itself over and over again, closing on 30 times now in real world gunfights, enormous value. It's all paper targets, but it's moving and shooting. It's high stress, low stress, fast and slow. It's beautiful stuff. And again, go to any of them, hujitsu.com. There's the one I'll be doing in South Bend, Indiana. It's going to be a great opportunity to train with me and have a chance to nurture people along and give them
hopefully we can fly when it comes to that point.
Down. You'd be glad you do. By July, hopefully we'll be able to fly.
Cool. So this is my final question. I actually meant to ask you earlier, but you're quite a prolific writer, and I really enjoy your writing style. I was curious if you could share a little bit about your writing process, because you've put out like 6 or 7 books, I think, right?
I'm glad you asked that. And I got 3 books in the pipeline right now. Number one, it's really good to have a writing partner. It's good to have a lot of people hungry out there, and they can do the writing, and then you can help them and edit it and work with it to varying degrees. But the easiest way, Grossman's shortcut to a book. You know, it's hard to write, but most of us can teach a pretty good class. So what I tell people is, you know, my most important book up to this point, I think On Spiritual Combat is going to transcend it. The most important book up to this point is On Combat. And with On Combat, what we did, my class had evolved from On Killing to a totally different topic. And we did a 2-day class. We audio taped the class. We had a lady transcribe it. There are people online that they'll turn it into paragraphs and sentences, just like that. She transcribed it, and then we added case studies and examples. If you can teach a decent class, you can write a book. You could take these podcasts. You know, Jerry Brown, Governor Jerry Brown in Colorado, He had me on his radio show quite a while back, before podcasts. But he collected the audios from his radio shows, transcribed them, and put them in a book. And it was a brilliant book. And I had a chapter in the book. I get it on my bookshelf now, yeah. But you could take these podcasts and you could have them transcribed. I'm a big fan of Upwork.com. And Upwork.com, we found the artists for our latest children's book there. There's people online. We can get, do you see their record? There's some lady in Malaysia who, you know, will transcribe your audio and turn it into a piece of paper, chapters and paragraphs and subparagraphs, and the work's already done. Again, if you can talk, if you can teach a class, then you write a book. And so audio tape that book, or take a series of your podcasts, have those podcasts transcribed, find somebody who's doing a good job breaking it into paragraphs and sentences, and you're 3/4 of the way home. Do a little edit run on that, and you're good to go. Jerry Brown knocked out a book by doing nothing. But you know, I don't agree with his politics in many ways, but he's a very wise man. And he took all of these radio interviews, and they were nice interviews. They were like half-hour interviews, transcribed them, put them in a book. It was a pretty darn good book. So you got all the tools you need right now to knock out your first book with your best podcasts, and collect that info and put it all in there.
Gotcha. And as far as like the material, are these just things like how did you go from On Killing to On Combat? Was it just your interest changed?
Yeah. I was teaching from On Killing. I got out of the Army in 1997. 98, I began teaching and presenting. But in that point in time, the only people who were in combat was law enforcement. The only people who were fighting for their lives on a daily basis was law enforcement. I was doing a lot of reading and law enforcement research. I'm teaching a lot of cops. And I realized that for those who fully prepared themselves, On Killing is just not that big a deal. The heart of combat, the thing that was help messing people up, was tunnel vision and slow motion time, auditory exclusion and memory gaps. And it was absolutely messing them up because nobody warned them this stuff was going to happen. So my class had evolved over a period of about 5 years or so to where we could transcribe it and audio tape it, and it was a totally different product. As you teach, the best way to learn is to teach. And you will find your mastery of the subject will evolve. And you'll hit a point where your class, you suddenly realize a decade later, is completely different than what you were teaching a decade ago. Because your mastery and your knowledge and your ability has come to new levels. And that's what it's all about. And there's a cycle. There's a cycle of learning and applying and learning and applying. There's not a cycle, it's a spiral staircase. And you learn and you apply at a higher level, and you learn and you apply at a higher level. So believe in what you're doing, you're training, you're talking to great people, your underlying concept will evolve. And somewhere down the line, you teach that class, you audio tape that, add in some of these transcripts you thought were of value, edit those to where you want them to cover what you want them to cover. And you have something enormously powerful with minimal effort.
Awesome.
Putting words on paper is hard work. It's just hard work.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk forever, no problem. We try to train those words and sentences, you know, on paper, it's hard work. But audio tape that class and you're halfway home.
Cool. Yeah, well, this has been awesome. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, it's been such an honor to speak with you. I'm going to see about seeing if I can meet you in July. That'd be great. We'll see how that goes.
Thanks,
thank you so much.
My pleasure. Hey, my website, killology.com, KILLOLOGY.com. The scholarly study of killing, sexology, suicidology. I coined the concept of not homicide, lawful killing, killology.com. And my books are all listed there. My website, also on Facebook and on LinkedIn, Lieutenant Colonel Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. But in the meanwhile, brother, keep up the fire. The world needs what you got to give. Believe in who you are. Thank you, Ben.